Hey, welcome to Jason FinTips. I'm Jason Ball, CFP, and I'm here to be your host today. Hey, quick question before we get started. This content shared during this video is for general education, entertainment, and information purposes only. It is not financial, investment, tax, legal, insurance, political, or medical advice. No personal recommendations are being made. Nothing presented should be interpreted as a solicitation, endorsement, or guarantee of results. Although I do hold the CFP, the ChFC, and the CHLU designations, I'm not acting as a financial advisor, fiduciary, tax professional, or legal representative through this platform. All case studies, examples, scenarios, and hypothetical illustrations are intended to illustrate financial principles only. Viewing and engaging this video does not create an advisor-client or fiduciary-client relationship or client-client relationship. As always, consult your own licensed professional for advice specific to your individual circumstances. And with that, I want to hop into today's topic of why your paycheck may feel a little smaller. This is something I've been talking about a little bit. A lot of stuff. A lot of individuals sit there and say, "Oh, well, I get a raise every year, but cost of goods go up." And you might earn more money, but a lot of things is there's a little thing called real income, and we're going to talk about that and how for the last 20 years, essentially, real incomes have gone down. So between taxes, inflation, and all these things, the money doesn't go as far as the end of the month. Um, so yeah. In this post, we're going to break down what happens when your take-home pay after taxes, marginal tax rates, and how they affect you. Inflation quietly, this is the big one that's slowly eating against everyone, is inflation quietly eats into your paycheck. Politicians, the politics of who actually shoulders the tax burden, and what you can do to protect yourself, and some other things we're going to go through. So we're going to start over here, taking a quick overview of the blog, and then we're going to dive into some different sections. So what is your after-tax take-home pay? Well, that's what you actually really get to keep. And inside you get your paycheck. We've all taken a look at that. You got your federal income taxes, your payroll taxes, which are Social Security and Medicare. You've also got state and local taxes. So it depends. Some states have a state income tax. Other states do not have a state income tax. Other states have a sales tax. So it kind of depends on that. So you also have different deductions for health insurance, retirement contributions. You might have student loan payments. The important part is your entire income, especially for retirement, your retirement income is tax deferred until you pull it out when you would put in a special account and held in that retirement account until it gets taxed when you pull it back out. And that's a traditional IRA versus a Roth. The important part is your entire income is not taxed at your top tax bracket. There's two different things here. There's the marginal effective tax. There's the marginal tax rate and your effective tax rate. The effective tax rate is how much total paycheck you pay. So let's say you could be at $100 in income and you paid a 10% effective tax rate of $10 in total tax is what you paid, but your marginal income tax rate was $22 or 22%. So you would actually pay on the next dollar earned, you would pay 22 cents rather than your total tax is not $22, it's $10. And of that $10, you might have had a portion of it that was paid at that top tax rate. Marginal tax rates in perspective. Marginal tax rates get a bad rap. Politicians often say taxes are too high, but history shows that currently tax rates are much lower than they've been in the past. In the 1960s, the top marginal federal tax rate was over 90%. Today, the highest tax rate is 37%, and most under 30 workers fall between 12 and 22% for their marginal tax rate. For example, if you make $50,000 in effective federal tax rate, it's closer to 10 to 12% after deductions, not a full 22%. Add payroll taxes and real tax rates might increase 15 to 18%. So here we kind of have a quick little breakdown of that and say, okay, if I had $30,000 income, I have 8% effective. My take-home pay is marginal tax bracket is 12%. The effective tax bracket was 8%. My take-home pay after federal tax bracket would be $27,600. If we had a marginal income of $50,000 in income, the marginal tax bracket would bump up to 22%. The effective tax rate, which is the one you need to be paying attention to, because we use the marginal effect tax rate for planning, trying to lower our effective tax rate. Our tax home pay after federal taxes would be example 44,000. And then if we see at the 80%, we still see the marginal tax bracket is still at 22%, but the effective tax rate has now been brought up to about 15% or about 68,000. These are just general illustration numbers to illustrate the concepts, and it's going to be on your individual tax returns. Inside there, there's something either behind the scenes that's actually kind of working, and inflation. And what inflation is it's the cost of goods kind of going up, and we've all seen that in the last few years, and this is in September 2025. For example, let's take an example and say your boss gives you a 4% raise. So you go, well, I got $100 this year, and the next year comes around, you're at $104. $104. You're like, hey, I got a raise to $104. But you go to the store to purchase that same thing of groceries, and those groceries that you purchased just the week before now cost $105. So you've still gotten a raise of 4%, and you're still got a $4 raise, but you still lose $1. So you've actually lost 1% in buying power. And so you go, okay, well, I lose 1% this year, 1% the next year. After about 10 or 20 years, your buying power can be down 10, 20, 30, 40%. And so that's what we're actually kind of watching on this hidden tax. So the actual amount of money that you've got of disposable income is slowly getting squeezed. And I like to think of this, another way to think about this is how many days do you have to work to actually fund your tax burden? So someone might have only had to work 10 days in 1980 versus today, or let's say in the 1990s, someone, or 2000, someone might have only had to work 10 days to pay for their taxes. Now they have to work 20. So they would have had 10 days worth of work, of example, money earned to go be more discretionary spending to spend on things. And this is that slow erosion of income that a lot of people, the working class, have felt that has been one of the problems that we're having is the real income that you have for take home, how much that dollar buys, and that dollar can be valued by things that the Federal Reserve does and how they manage the money supply. How much is that actual dollar going to purchase? That's the economic reality when people need to be looking at the voting block going, what are we going to do for policies that increase my real effective take home income, and how much am I going to have more earned income that I can actually have real money to spend? The other thing we've lived through is pretty much everyone on here under 40 has only lived under a trickle-down economic theory. You've probably heard of trickle-down economics. The idea is for cutting the corporate taxes and cutting the wealthy's taxes, and that's going to give them more money, and they're going to spend this more money. They're going to go out and decide to go spend more money, and that is going to increase the economic activity. Well, we've got 40 years and this has not worked. This is just not flat worked. It's gone the different way, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest that. But that's what trickle down economics does. And so slowly what we've seen is, for example, the goal was to slowly increase your nominal salary, but your inflation adjusted salary, here we kind of take a look at this. We don't need to look back at that one. So the question is the tax burden. We've also seen switch and start to get switched up, and now we see the tax burden is a few people are paying a lot more taxes because not as many people are paying taxes, and the reason that's happening is because not as many people are actually there's not as many people actually earning as much money. It's been concentrated in a few, and this is what we've kind of started to see, and not having the middle out or a bottom up. Corporate taxes are passed down to consumers from higher prices. We've seen payroll taxes have reduced our take home. Sales taxes and fees hit lower income households harder because they spend a larger share. And what this is if they do if someone has $500,000 a year, they're using a certain percentage of, $1 million a year household is going to the store. They're not going to notice that much of a dollar increase in a box of cereal. But if it's a family of four trying to live on a $50,000 salary and every penny counts, a dollar here and, an extra 10 items at the store, their food bill goes up 10, 20, $50 a month or $100 a month. That has a real effect. And a lot of people are feeling that right now in this economy. And I think we're getting to the point where there's been a lot of people are doing really well, but a much larger percentage of people are having a much harder time struggling with it. And that's where we're seeing where we can actually have a point in our current economy right now where someone can be extremely excited and say things are going great, have never been better, and another group of people can be, I'm working as hard as I can, I can barely make ends meet, and we're basically having a hard time meeting our, I'm having a hard time putting food on the table. And this is going on, and and the two things can both be true at the same time. Um, so essentially, we've also seen the dollar get a little weaker, and they're actually doing that under the Trump administration. Um, so you can't really control the tax or the policy inflation except for voting. You can invest for growth, build your emergency fund, prioritize assets over stuff. Um, and really, voting is one of your most overlooked financial tools that a lot of people controls, where the assets and resources are going to go to, what type of policies and politicians are going to be put in place, what type of retirement benefits you're going to get, or what type of social security is going to be a big one that's going to be coming up here in the next election in 2028, because it's going to be something that has to be addressed by 2030. These are some big things that are going to have to be addressed in our lifetime, and how we're going to need to have educated voters on this. A couple things I wanted to look at here was, you can go check this out on Wikipedia and read a little bit known about trickle-down economics, and this was Reaganomics. It was also known as the horse and sparrow theory, which is essentially that you feed the horse some oats, and the sparrow gets to eat what comes out of the horse. And this is broadly defined supply side economics. It's something that our entire life we've lived under, and I'm shocked at where we've ended up underneath this. It's definitely not. It's the goal is from the top down versus from a bottom out and up. One of the things we've also seen is called the Gini coefficient, and this measures the wealth of the inequality in a nation as we've gone. And since about 1980, when Reagan introduced this, we've seen exactly what we expected. That was designed by the policy, is that we've seen the money has been split into. They said we're going to take and start having a return on capital, and rather than having that, we're going to start funding money to the assets having more ability to return income. And slowly we've gone up into higher income over the last 40 years, and this is what we're looking at. Is a Gini coefficient means that there's not nearly as many people on average. We could take a look at the globe, and how the Gini coefficient is just like how much disparity, like how wealthy is one person versus how poor the poorest person is, and they kind of look for the middle of that. Here we can take a look at a lot of countries where the U.S. has a Gini coefficient that's kind of a similar color, but it's a little darker. It's getting up there. We've seen this completely in our whole lives. This Gini coefficient has been the wealth disparity in the United States getting further. This was one I wanted to look at here, the net personal wealth. And what we can see from this is the quartiles, and this was a chart from, I believe it was Wikipedia right here. It was in Wikipedia. Is where we got this one. Yeah, this is basically what's happened underneath net personal wealth. What we've seen is trickle down economics has done exactly what it was designed to do. It is designed to shift money to the top 1% and even top 0.01%, really, of asset owners, and then that is going to drive the free market. So that's why we can have a Main Street not doing well, but we can also have a stock market that is doing extremely well and reaching new highs, because they're selling money to there's two total different economies going on right now in the U.S. And I think that's one of the big things that has kind of come out of me, that I've started to really notice about this. Most people are going to have a harder time because they're going to have lower income. They're working more days of money to earn that same amount. And so how do we address this? We have to start looking at the policies that are put in place, and the policies that are put in place are based on how we vote. And this was another one I pulled up here. This is once again in Wikipedia, average median household wealth by age group. And I really wanted to point in here and say that there's been a policy of not only the trickle-down economics, but there's also been a policy of focusing on homeowner wealth. And what we've seen is housing prices have been one of the things that they've been able to inflate the value for the net worth of the generations that you got out of high school, you went in, you bought a house, it cost a few years' salary, it was a little expensive, but it was within the able to be affordable. And what we've seen is that there's a couple things going on here. One is the number of new homes being built, but we've also seen the financialization of a lot of homes. So the cost of those homes is a lot higher. This is one thing I'm really concerned about long term for the younger generations, and I mean like under 30s, is the age of going for purchasing a new home has gone from about age 30 to about age 38 to 40. The cost, so there's got to be higher costs to get into purchasing a house. There's also on top of that higher interest costs, which is going to be a drag on retirement savings, which is going to have a drag on equity that's going to be owned into the home. And the other big thing that I really wanted to look at in this chart was we have average wealth and we have median wealth. So if we look at the average, let's say 40 or 30-year-old, their average wealth is about 95,000 with median wealth of about 29,000. And what really interesting about that is you need to understand median is the midpoint. So you count 1 to 100 and you pick the 50th person and say, how much is the 50th middle? What is that number? That number, the 50th person, is about 29,000. You then have to say, well, what's the average wealth? They add up all the money owned by those 100 people and then divide it by 100 and say that's the average wealth. What this tends to show is that the median is skewed very far to the right. So there's a lot of people there's a group that's sitting to have a lot of money, and a lot of the majority of people, the larger distribution of them, is not having nearly as much. And we'll see another graph that explains that. And this also kind of goes in and explains a little bit of what we're seeing of the voting divide and asset owners. So you have an asset owners. If you're young, you're under 35, and you're not voting and not taking an active person, this is affecting your home ownership rates, the interest rates, how the economy, who they're going to war. So looking at this, we see that we have voting pools that have been able to get in and been rewarded, and they've managed the financialization of this. We've seen a very long increase of their net worth, especially on the average net worth of the top income earners. The average median income has gone up, but not as much. So we came over here to a nice little one. I wanted to take a look at the first home buyer median age for all buyers. So the median age is popped up. Even back in 2019, it was, mostly it's been about 30 years. And now all of a sudden it's popped up to one of the highest of 38 years old for the first time home buyers ever, with all buyers about 56. So this means a lot of young people are just flat out not able to, unless they're a very high income earner, you receive some inheritance to be able to do this. It's very hard for a lot of young people to come up with the capital to be able to get into a house. And a lot of these are done through financializations and strategies that were put in place by what politicians wanted for the valuations of what they were going to inflate assets. We've also got what we were talked about is that was the real disposable household income. And that's how much money you actually have to go spend after you paid your taxes, your rent, your food. How much do you actually have to go do anything? This right here was another one I wanted to look at. This was just the real disposable personal income. Usually it's this was right during the COVID, it spiked, but we've also seen it kind of go down. But what I look at this over a long-term period, I'm really seeing that, we were actually doing pretty good up here, but it really has not grown on the trend line that should actually be a little higher up here. So if it had just grown a normal trend line, so what we're seeing is actually not only did we went up for a little bit under COVID, but what we're seeing is that disposable personal income, the amount of money most people have to spend, is not as high as it used to be, or is below the trend line. Personal consumption and expenditures, these are just over at the Feds. Personal savings. This was one of the things I wanted to look at and say, how are we kind of going into a recession, or not a recession, but how are people doing? If we kind of look back, kind of over the, we take a look at the max, you can see that during different times period now, between 2010 and 2016 has been really tough on a lot of people, but we still see that people seem to be saving a larger percentage of their income, which is pretty good for the long term. This is a graph that's called the disposable income and spending graph. And what we're just going to take a quick look here is to say, okay, you're like real personal consumption, real disposable personal income. We've just kind of flipped over where expenses are kind of going over the income. So people are starting to spend more. They're not able to save anymore. Their cost of living has cost more than what they're actually making. So you're losing money. This was over here on the 6 facts about. This was a Pew Research one. Highest earning 20% of families made more than half of all income in 2018. So once again, what we're seeing is the the wealth disparity of there's people that are doing extremely well, and then there's the other 80%. And I don't know how this is going to be taken care of in our policies and our politics, but this is something that's going to have to be that's going to be a need to be addressed. Um, One of the other ones in here I wanted to look at was, um, and this was the one I was referring to earlier, was the richest family on their group have gained wealth. So you see, through the 1989s, through the 90s, through 98 to 2007, we could see that all income groups had gained um, family value, change in family wealth. What really concerns me on this one is that a lot of families, especially through this early 2007 to 2016, after we housing crash, they remained in the hole. So there's a lot of wealth that they had to dig back out of. Um, the wealth gap is more than doubled. This is a good gap to kind of take a look at this one. Um, Really, the simple thing of this is that the middle income has been going down, upper income has been going up, and lower income. So there's one group that's been doing very well off underneath these tax policies for the last 40 years. Most of the other groups, on average, that is at least 8 out of 10 people, are not doing as well underneath the policies that have been put in place. And if we're looking for democracy and we want to have people be doing well, that's not necessarily what we want. Um, no, this was where I wanted to pop in here and look for. That was the wrong one. I thought this had the Gini coefficient here. Just a second. Uh, yeah, income inequality. This is a Gini coefficient. And it's just kind of saying, you know what, over the last 30 years, we've basically seen the income disparity kind of start to get wider. And this is exactly what we're seeing in our politics, exactly what we're seeing in the markets, and we're exactly seeing where you go see a lot of pickup trucks that are selling at 100 to 150,000, and then you have a lot of people. The majority of people can't afford those, but there's the middle market seems to be kind of disappearing. This was one of the charts I think was actually the best. When a lot of people think back, okay, what did income equality look like in the 1930s? There's 1963s. Here's where we start going about 1983, and here's 1989, 1992, 95, 98, 2000. We go to 2004, 2007, 2010, 2013, 16, and here we are in about 2022. And what we've seen is exactly what the policy was designed to do of trickle down economics. There has been other economic policies that have been put in place over the decades, but this is the policy that has been put in place for trickle down economics, that the goal is to shift the average income from the wealth supply of money from a larger percentage of the population to a smaller percentage of the population. So you're just basically if it was a level water, they're just pushing everything to one side. And that is what trickle down economics decided to do underneath Ronald Reagan. And this is what was been put down for trickle down economics for our entire lives. And this has affected everyone. Now, there's people that have done great. There's people that have got in and got great paying jobs. We've also seen the outsourcing of a lot of the positions and jobs. But this is what the U.S. is facing with, and I think we're finally coming to a little bit of a terms with this. So, and we've also a little bit of stuff for our jobs being outsourced to other countries. So, when I sit there and say that I think one of the biggest things people can do to affect what's happening in their economy and their financial plan and their financial life is things like, what am I going to get to vote for higher incomes? How is the government going to spend its money and its resources, and what's it going to focus on? And all that is done by being a well-informed voter, because it is a big part of your financial plan these days. Getting back to our whole things, your paycheck is getting squeezed. Most likely, there are some people that are doing great. There's some people that are that are very fortunate and absolutely fabulous for them. But we need to start focusing on what's going on with our middle class and how can everyone. I think that's where we get a lot of the frustration is economic independence, not having a little bit of money in your pocket and not being able to start a family. These are some of the things I think we really need to focus on long term. And with that, I hope you have a great day. Leave any comments down there, and thanks a lot.